He has billions, but no one to talk to. She has talent, but serves champagne to survive. A luxurious ballroom, the lonely Japanese millionaire in the crowd. A simple waitress ignored by everyone. Two invisible people who finally see each other. A phrase in Japanese. A forbidden dance. Public humiliation. And then a proposal that will change everything. Destinies crossed by a moment of courage. How far would you go for a lost dream? Where are you watching from? Comment below. If this story caught your attention, leave a like and subscribe now. There's a lot more excitement coming, and you won't want to miss it. The sky over Sao Paulo displayed a gradient of orange and purple. When the first guests began to arrive at the terrace of the Hotel Panorama, crystals sparkled, laughter echoed through the perfumed air, and the string orchestra played softly, while Sao Paulo's elite celebrated the wedding of Marcelo Albuquerque and Beatriz Mendonça, heirs to two fortunes that were now united not only by love, but also by financial convenience, as many there discreetly commented over glasses of champagne. Nakamura adjusted the bow tie on his impeccable tuxedo and took a deep breath before entering the hall. At 45, the Japanese businessman's face bore traces of experience and seriousness that contrasted with the festive atmosphere. His steps were precise and measured, as if he were at a business meeting rather than a celebration. As he walked among the guests, he felt curious glances that quickly averted when he tried to return them. "It's that Japanese guy, the owner of Nakamura Technologies," whispered a woman in a sequined dress to her companion without bothering to lower her voice. "They say he's worth billions, but he can barely order a coffee in Portuguese. I heard he only came because he invested in the groom's father's companies," replied the other, adjusting her pearl necklace. "It must be a contractual obligation to invite partners, even exotic ones." Hiroshi pretended not to understand, but his Portuguese was good enough to grasp the essence of those words. He chose a table in the farthest corner from where he could observe the city, which was now his second home, although he had never felt as foreign as he did that night. With slightly trembling fingers, he adjusted the small, golden cherry blossom brooch on his lapel. It was the last gift from his late wife. Across the hall, Carla Oliveira adjusted the black and white uniform provided by the event company, where she had worked for almost 10 years. Her brown hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her honey-colored eyes scanned the room with the efficiency of someone who had served at hundreds of parties like this one. At 24, she carried a responsibility on her shoulders that did not match her youth. "Remember the rules, right, Carlina?" Furcos, the supervisor, passed her carrying an empty tray. "Always smile, only speak when spoken to, and for God's sake, don't spill anything on those ladies' $10,000, $1,000 dresses." She acknowledged him with a polite smile, though inside she felt a pang of resentment. 3 years ago, she was at the University of Sao Paulo. She was considered the most promising student in the translation and interpretation course, specializing in Oriental languages, until life decided to change her plans. As she circulated among the tables with a tray of canapes, her eyes fell on the lonely figure of Hiroshi. She noticed how the other guests avoided his table, as if his presence were inconvenient. She noticed the way he looked at the horizon, with a melancholy she knew well, the loneliness of someone who is surrounded by people, but completely invisible to them all. At that moment, without either of them knowing, their destinies began to intertwine in a silent dance that would change their lives forever. The night wore on, and Carla continued her methodical work among the tables. Her feet already hurt in her low-heeled shoes, and her professional smile was beginning to feel heavy. As she collected empty glasses, she overheard fragments of conversations about million-dollar investments, international travel, and high society scandals. It was a world that seemed to exist in a parallel dimension to her reality of overdue bills and everyday worries. "We need someone at the Japanese table," said Marcos, approaching with a look of displeasure. "No one wants to be responsible for him. They say he just stares without saying anything. It makes us nervous." "Can I take that area?" offered Carla, trying to sound casual. "Are you sure?" Marcos raised an eyebrow. "Look, I don't want any drama if he stares at you while saying things you don't understand. These foreigners sometimes don't respect the girls who work here." Carla felt her face flush at the insinuation, but she kept her composure. I'll be fine. He's just another customer. With a tray of drinks, she approached Hiroshi's table. Up close, she noticed details that distance had not revealed. The small wrinkles around his tired eyes, his perfectly upright posture, which looked more like the armor than a habit, and the delicate brooch he occasionally touched like a talisman. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" she asked in Portuguese, extending the tray with champagne and water. Hiroshi looked up, surprised that someone had finally spoken to him. "Water, please," he replied with a thick accent, the words coming out carefully articulated. When Carla placed the glass of water in front of him, he bowed his head slightly and said, "Thank you, itahimaste." She replied in perfect Japanese without thinking. "You're welcome." The effect was instantaneous. Hiroshi's eyes widened and, for the first time that night, his expression opened up completely, like a flower touched by the morning sun. "Do you speak Japanese?" he asked in his native language, his voice suddenly animated. "Yes, I studied it for 3 years at university," replied Carla, also in Japanese, feeling a strange emotion as she used a language she hadn't practiced outside of her stored books for so long. Across the room, Marcos watched the interaction with suspicion. Around the nearby table, some guests cast curious glances and commented among themselves, surprised by the apparent familiarity between the waitress and the foreign businessman. "What's your name?" Hiroshi asked, sitting up straight in his chair. "Carla Oliveira." She smiled, and for a moment she was no longer the invisible employee, but the brilliant student who once dreamed of connecting worlds through words. "I'm Hiroshi Nakamura. It's unexpected to find someone who speaks my language so well here." A burly man in a light-colored suit approached, interrupting the moment. "Nakamura, I finally found you. I'm Roberto Mendonça, the bride's father. We need to talk about that investment in the pharmaceutical sector." Carla took a step back, automatically returning to her invisible role. But before she could walk away completely, Hiroshi looked at her with an expression that clearly said, "Don't go far." And she didn't. For the first time in a long time, Carla felt she had found someone who really existed. The early hours of the morning were advancing, and the party was taking on new contours, with alcohol flowing freely and the music getting louder. Carla watched from afar as Hiroshi, after a brief conversation with the bride's father, returned to his solitude, although now his eyes occasionally searched for her among the crowd. When their eyes met, there was a silent connection, like two castaways recognizing each other on the open sea. "What was that?" asked Debra, the other waitress, leaning against the bar counter where Carla was organizing glasses. "Do you and the Japanese guy know each other from somewhere?" "No," Carla replied, feeling her cheeks burn. "I only know a little of his language." "A little? It looked like you were giving a lecture in Tokyo." Debra laughed. "Be careful. Marcos already has his eye on you. You know how he is about customers getting too close." Carla nodded, but her gaze returned to Hiroshi across the room. There was something about him that intrigued her. It wasn't just their shared loneliness, but a quiet dignity that echoed within her. Over the next few hours, she found little excuses to walk past his table, serve water, collect napkins, offer snacks. At each brief encounter, they exchanged a few words in Japanese. He asked about her studies. She asked about his company. Fragments of life shared between trays and glasses, building an invisible bridge over a social chasm that in any other context would be insurmountable. "Why did you stop studying?" Hiroshi asked during one of these interactions, his voice low so as not to attract attention. Carla hesitated. "Adjusting napkins on the table, my mother got sick with leukemia. I had to take care of her and work." Hiroshi nodded with an understanding that went beyond words. Family first. Always honorable. "She's better now," but Carla shrugged her shoulders, the gesture saying what words could not. Some opportunities, once lost, never return. The orchestra began a soft waltz, and several couples headed to the center of the hall. Lights were dimmed, creating a more intimate atmosphere. Carla watched with a polite smile, while internally she felt that familiar pang, that of someone who always serves the happiness of others without ever tasting its flavor. Hiroshi also watched the dance with distant eyes, lost in his own memories. Without thinking too much, Carla approached his table again. "Aren't you going to dance, Kimura-san?" she asked in a light tone, trying to sound casual as she picked up a napkin. He smiled wistfully. I haven't danced in a long time. Since my wife. His voice faltered and he touched the small gold brooch on his lapel. I'm sorry, Carla replied softly, noticing for the first time the significance of that object. Hiroshi took a deep breath as if gathering courage. Actually, I think I would dance if I had the right partner. Their eyes met and something passed between them. A mutual understanding, a recognition of souls. Around them, the world continued in its frenzy of wealth and ostentation. But in that small space between them, there was only the truth of two human beings, seeing each other beyond all social strata. Carla looked around nervously. Marcos was busy on the other side of the hall. Most of the guests were focused on the dance floor or absorbed in champagne-fueled conversations. It was crazy for sure. It could cost her her job. But something inside her, something that had been dormant for a long time, suddenly awakened. I'll dance with you, she finally said, discreetly extending her hand, hidden by the tablecloth. Hiroshi's eyes sparkled with surprise and hesitation, and then, in a gesture that defied all the conventions of that party, he took her hand. Time seemed to freeze as Hiroshi and Carla took their first steps on the edge of the dance floor. Kai had left the tray on an empty table, an act of silent rebellion against the unwritten rules that kept her in her place. His hands, firm yet delicate, guided her with a confidence that contradicted his earlier statement about not having danced in years. You dance very well for someone out of practice, she commented in Japanese, trying to ignore the stares that were beginning to turn toward the strange couple. Some things the body doesn't forget, he replied with a discreet smile, like riding a bike or honoring moments of kindness. They moved with restrained elegance, maintaining a respectful distance, which still seemed more intimate than any other contact they had experienced in years. For Carla, it was as if she had finally stepped out of the shadows where she had always served. For Hiroshi, it was as if he had left behind, for a few brief minutes, the weight of loneliness he had carried since setting foot in Brazil. But the bubble of enchantment in which they found themselves began to break when the first whispers reached their ears. Look, the waitress and the Japanese guy, said a female voice loud enough to be heard on purpose. She must be trying to secure a generous tip, replied another with a nasal laugh, or maybe a green card. Hiroshi noticed the exact moment when Carla's body stiffened. Don't pay attention to them, he whispered, squeezing her hand lightly. I'm used to it, she replied, but the light in her eyes had dimmed. The comments became more audible as the music progressed. Nearby couples subtly moved away, as if afraid of contamination. Some discreetly took photos with their cell phones, probably to share on social media with malicious captions. How absurd, said a man in a navy blue suit a few steps away from them. Mendonça needs to review the level of staff he hires for his events. This isn't a funk dance. Carla's face burned, torn between shame and indignation. Hiroshi, sensing her discomfort, was about to suggest they return to their table when the imposing figure of Marcos appeared at the edge of the dance floor, his face contorted into a mask of controlled fury. Carla, he called in a sharp tone, I need to talk to you now. Hiroshi felt her hand tremble slightly before slipping from his. It'll be okay, he said in Japanese, but his voice lacked the conviction he was trying to convey. I'm sorry, Carla murmured, before following Marcos to a corner away from the hall. The stares and comments followed her like persistent shadows. From a distance, Hiroshi watched the scene helplessly as the supervisor gestured furiously and pointed to the exit. Even without understanding Portuguese fluently, he understood perfectly the universal language of humiliation. Carla kept her chin up, receiving the storm of reprimands with dignity, but her teary eyes betrayed her composure. When Marcos finally finished his speech, she removed the small white apron from her waist. She handed it over with a firm gesture and walked toward the back door without looking back. Hiroshi sat down again at his lonely table, feeling strangely emptier than before. Around him, the party continued as if nothing had happened. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, but something fundamental had changed within him. He picked up a linen napkin from the table and, with the pen from his diary, began to write in his imperfect Portuguese. When he finished, he folded it carefully and called another waiter. Please, he said in a low voice, give this to Marcos, the supervisor. As the waiter walked away with the napkin, Hiroshi touched the cherry blossom brooch on his lapel, as if seeking approval for what he had just done. And somewhere inside, he knew that his late wife would be smiling. The light rain falling on Sao Paulo seemed to match Carla's mood the next morning as she sat at the table in the small kitchen of the apartment she shared with her mother in the Penha neighborhood, turning the cup of cold coffee between her hands, reliving every moment of the previous night. The clock on the wall read 10:17. On any other Sunday, she would be getting ready for her second shift at the downtown restaurant where she worked on weekends. But today, the weight of the humiliation she had suffered still kept her immobilized. "You're very quiet," observed Donna Helena, her mother, entering the kitchen with slow steps, leaning on a cane, a remnant of her long battle with leukemia, which, although in remission, had left permanent marks. "Did something happen at that rich people's party?" Carla forced a smile. "Nothing much, Mom, just tired." But Mrs. Helena knew her daughter better than anyone. She sat down in front of her with difficulty and covered her hand with hers, marked by prominent veins. "You've never been a good liar, my daughter." Since she was little, her eyes had always told the truth that her mouth tried to hide. Faced with her mother's understanding gaze, Carla finally let the tears fall. Not from sadness, she realized, but from anger. Anger at being humiliated, at losing her job, at having her dreams interrupted, at living in a world where kindness was punished and appearances were worth more than substance. Between sobs, she told her mother about the lonely Japanese businessman, about how they had talked in Japanese, about the dance and the disastrous consequences. Mrs. Helena listened in silence, her tired eyes reflecting a mixture of understanding and concern. "You've always had a heart too big for the world we live in," she said finally, wiping a tear from her daughter's face. "Remember what your father always said? Courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it." Carla nodded, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest as she remembered her father, who had died when she was only 15. He was the one who first awakened her passion for foreign languages with his stories of travels he could never take. "What am I going to do now, Mom? That salary was important to us." "We'll find a way, as we always have," replied Mrs. Helena, with the serenity of someone who had weathered worse storms. "You are young and talented." That was just the doorbell interrupted their conversation. Carla quickly wiped her tears and went to answer it, hoping to find a neighbor borrowing eggs or sugar, as was common on Sundays. But when she opened the door, she found only a white envelope on the doormat with no return address. She looked both ways down the hallway, but there was no one in sight. Back in the kitchen, she opened the envelope with curiosity. Inside, she found a handwritten letter on Hotel Panorama letterhead, along with an elegant business card. "What is this?" asked Mrs. Helena, adjusting her glasses to see better. Carla began to read aloud, translated from Japanese. "Dear Miss Oliveira, I apologize for my poor Portuguese in writing this letter as I wish. That is why I am writing in Japanese, trusting in your exceptional skills with my language. I want to express my deepest gratitude for the moment of humanity we shared yesterday in a room full of people. You were the only one who really saw me, and because of that, I was also able to see you, not as an employee, but as the extraordinary person you are. I learned from your supervisor that your gesture of kindness resulted in unfair consequences. This saddens me deeply and I feel responsible. Please accept my sincere apologies. I would very much like to talk to you, if you will allow me, not as a customer, but as someone who values the rare connection we had. I have a proposal I would like to share with you related to your language skills, which impressed me so much. I will be at Cafe Botanico near Ibirapuera Park tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you can meet me, I would be honored. If you cannot or prefer not to see me again, I will completely understand. With respect and admiration, Hiroshi Nakamura. The business card had his name embossed in gold, followed by something that made Carla hold her breath. Director of the Nakamura Foundation for Cultural Exchange, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. "Mom," Carla whispered, feeling her heart race. "I think I just danced with the right person." The Botanical Cafe, with its glass walls and ceiling covered with vines, was an oasis of tranquility amid the urban chaos of Sao Paulo. Carla arrived 15 minutes before the appointed time, wearing the best her modest wardrobe allowed, a navy blue three-quarter sleeve blouse and a black pencil skirt she saved for job interviews. Her hair, usually tied back, fell in soft waves over her shoulders. She chose a table in the corner from where she could watch the entrance without being immediately noticed. Her restless hands repeatedly adjusted the cutlery already lined up on the cloth napkin. Part of her still couldn't believe she was there, that she had received that letter, that this meeting was really happening. At exactly 2 p.m., Hiroshi Nakamura entered the cafe. He was wearing an impeccable light gray suit, but no tie, giving him a more approachable appearance than on the night of the party. His eyes scanned the room until they found hers, and a discreet smile lit up his face. Carla felt an unexpected warmth rise from her neck to her cheeks. Señorita Oliveira, he greeted her in Japanese, approaching her and bowing slightly. Thank you for coming, Mr. Nakamura, she replied, standing up briefly. Thank you for the invitation, and please call me Carla. He sat down across from her, and for a moment they both remained silent, as if recalibrating the connection they had established on the night of the party, now in a completely different context. Your Japanese is really impressive, Hiroshi commented. I've never met a Brazilian with such fluency. Where did you learn it? At the University of Sao Paulo, I majored in translation and interpretation, focusing on Japanese and English, replied Carla, feeling a mixture of pride and melancholy as she spoke of her interrupted academic past. A young waitress approached to take their orders. Hiroshi looked at Carla, waiting for her to speak first. Green tea, please, she asked in Portuguese. The same for me, said Hiroshi. Then turning to the waitress, he added with effort, green tea for me too. When they were alone again, Carla gathered the courage to broach the subject that really mattered. In your letter, you mentioned a proposal related to my language skills. I confess I was curious. Hiroshi nodded, sitting up straight in his chair. Before that, I would like to better understand your current situation. You mentioned at the party that you had to drop out of school to take care of your mother. How is she now? But better, replied Carla, surprised and touched that he remembered that detail. Her leukemia has been in remission for 8 months. She still faces side effects from the treatment, but the doctors are optimistic. And do you have plans to return to university? Carla gave a sad smile. I would love to, but the reality is that I can't. I lost my scholarship, and the tuition fees are impossible for me. Besides, I need to work to support my mother's household and medication. The teas arrived served in small individual teapots with delicate porcelain cups. Hiroshi thanked the waitress with a nod. Then he turned to Carla with a more serious expression. Carla-san, what do you know about the Nakamura Foundation? She shook her head. Nothing, really. Just what I saw on your card. The foundation was created by my family 20 years ago after my father's death, he explained, pouring tea for both of them with precise movements. Initially, it focused only on preserving Japanese cultural traditions. But when I married Hannah, who was a language teacher, we expanded to promote language exchange between Japan and other countries. He paused to take a sip of tea, and Carla noticed how his fingers unconsciously caressed the cherry blossom brooch. When Hannah passed away 5 years ago, he decided to honor her memory by making language education our priority. We created a scholarship program for talented students facing financial difficulties. Carla's heart raced. She held the cup tightly to hide the sudden tremor in her hands. I came to Brazil to establish partnerships with local universities and select candidates for our program. But frankly, I didn't expect to find someone with your talent, especially in such unusual circumstances. He took an elegant leather folder out of his briefcase and placed it on the table. Carla-san, I would like to offer you a full scholarship to complete your translation studies, including a 6-month immersion period in Kyoto. The scholarship covers all academic expenses, housing, transportation, and includes a monthly stipend that would allow you to help your mother while you are away. Carla felt as if the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She looked at the folder, then at Hiroshi, then back at the folder, unable to formulate a coherent response. Why? That was all she could finally say. Why me? Hiroshi studied her for a moment, his eyes revealing a complexity of emotions that his restrained words did not express. Because talent without opportunity is like a fine instrument that is never played, a loss to the whole world. And because on the night of the party, you reminded me of something I had forgotten, that true human connection transcends languages, social classes, and all the barriers we build between us. He gently pushed the folder toward her. You don't have to answer now. Take it home. Read all the details. Talk to your mother. I'll be in Brazil for another 2 weeks. Carla looked at the folder, feeling the weight of the possibilities it contained. A future she thought was lost forever was now opening up before her again. It was scary and wonderful at the same time, like dancing at a party where she wasn't invited, but this time without fear of being kicked out. The following days passed in a whirlwind of emotions for Carla. The folder Hirosh had given her contained not only the details of the scholarship, but a whole world of possibilities that she had buried along with her dreams. She read and reread the documents every night, while during the day, she ran between job interviews and hospitals for routine appointments with her mother. Donna Helena watched her daughter with a mixture of hope and apprehension. On a particularly quiet night, while Carla was organizing the documents on the living room table for the 10th time, her mother finally expressed her concern. "If you go, who will accompany me to my appointments?" she asked in a soft voice, but one laden with genuine concern. Carla looked up from the papers, feeling the familiar weight of guilt tighten her chest. "Mom, don't get me wrong." Donna Helena raised her hand, interrupting her. "I'm not asking you to give up. I'm asking because we need a practical plan if you're really going to take this opportunity. And I think you should take it." Surprised, Carla sat down next to her mother on the worn sofa. "Do you really think so? But what about your health? And the bills?" Donna Helena smiled with that wisdom that only mothers possess. "My daughter, I've spent the last 3 years watching you give up your dreams to take care of me. Do you really think I want you to continue sacrificing your life for practical matters?" She pointed to the documents. "From what I understand, this stipend would cover my medications and still leave enough to hire someone to help me occasionally. Even so, we would be separated for months with an ocean between us," whispered Carla, verbalizing her greatest fear. "And since when does physical distance separate united hearts?" Donna Helena took her daughter's hands in hers. "Your father used to say that the people we love are never really far away because we carry them here." She touched Carla's chest. "Besides, I have Josefa by my side, Clay downstairs. And it's not like we're in 1980. There are video calls, messages, all the things you young people use." Carla laughed through the tears that were beginning to form. "When did you become so modern, huh?" "When I realized I couldn't let fear of the future steal my happiness in the present," Helena replied, wiping a tear from her daughter's cheek. "Now tell me something honestly. Is it just the scholarship that's making you feel this way? Or is there something else going on? Something related to a certain Japanese businessman, perhaps?" Carla felt her face flush. "Mom, it's nothing like that. Mr. Nakamura is just a benefactor. He lost his wife too. He's just honoring her memory through the foundation." "Hmm," muttered Mrs. Helena with a mischievous gleam in her eyes. "Interesting how you went from Sor Nakamura to Hiroshi so quickly." "It was a slip of the tongue," defended Carla, feeling like a teenager caught red-handed again. "Anyway, he's returning to Japan in a few days. I probably won't even see him again after I decide on the scholarship." "Have you decided yet?" Carla took a deep breath, looking at the scattered documents, at the photo of Kyoto University with its cherry blossom gardens, at the schedule detailing the next 18 months of her potential life. "I think so," she finally replied, "but first I need to make sure there are no hidden conditions in this offer." "What do you mean? People like him, with money and power, sometimes expect something in return. Epuishan, I need to make sure this opportunity is really what it seems to be." Donna Helena squeezed her daughter's hand. "I trust your judgment. You've always been good at reading people. And if this man is half of what you've described, I think his intentions are sincere." The next day, or I should say, with her heart racing and her hands slightly trembling, Carla sent a message to the number Heroes had left, asking for another meeting. The reply came almost immediately. He would wait for her at the same cafe at the same time. After hanging up the phone, Carla went to her room and opened the desk drawer where she kept her most precious treasures. Among old photos and letters from her father, she found a small notebook from her college days. On the first page, she had written in Japanese, "Words build bridges between worlds." She ran her fingers over the phrase, feeling as if she were talking to her younger self, that girl full of dreams who believed she could change the world through words. Suddenly, she realized that she was, in fact, standing before a bridge, not only to resume her studies, but to recover something essential about herself that had been lost in the years of struggle and survival. She closed the notebook with a new determination shining in her eyes. Regardless of what happened at the meeting with Hiroshi, one thing was clear. She could no longer ignore the call of her true path. The second meeting at Cafe Botanico had a different atmosphere. The initial anxiety had been replaced by palpable anticipation, and both Carla and Hiroshi seemed more at ease with each other. Sitting at the same table as the previous meeting, they now shared not only tea, but also an elaborate French patisserie dish, which Hiroshi had insisted on ordering. So, he said after Carla finished explaining the doubts that kept her hesitant about accepting the scholarship, are you afraid that there is some kind of unwritten condition for this opportunity? She felt it, feeling simultaneously relieved and embarrassed for expressing her distrust so openly. I apologize if that sounds ungrateful or offensive. It's just that the world rarely offers gifts without expecting something in return, he added with an understanding smile. Don't apologize. It's a legitimate concern, and frankly, it shows intelligence on your part to question it. Hiroshi took a sip of his tea, seeming to gather his thoughts. Carla-san, let me be completely transparent about what I expect from you if you accept our proposal. He counted them off on his fingers. First, commitment to your studies. Second, participation in the Foundation's cultural activities when requested. Third, availability to occasionally assist with official translations between our partner organizations in Brazil and Japan. Finally, after completing the program, you should consider mentoring other Brazilian students interested in following a similar path. He paused, his eyes meeting hers sincerely. Nothing else. No personal obligation to me or anyone else. No debt to be repaid beyond your academic and professional commitment. The contract spells all this out, but I understand that documents don't always capture true intentions. Carla studied his face, looking for any sign of duplicity, but found only genuine frankness that disarmed her. Why are you doing this for me? She asked again, still not entirely convinced. There must be dozens of talented students in situations similar to mine. A melancholy smile touched Hiroshi's lips. There are many, yes, and our foundation helps several of them, but your question is valid. He hesitated briefly, as if deciding how much of himself to reveal. Allow me to tell you a story. He settled into his chair and began. When I met my wife, Han, she was just a young assistant professor at the university where I was studying business administration. The daughter of farmers from a small province, she had fought against all odds to get there, with no family connections, no wealth, just her extraordinary talent and fierce determination. Her fingers automatically found the cherry blossom brooch, a gesture that Carla already recognized as an emotional reflex. One day, during an international conference, the keynote speaker, a highly respected American academic, began to talk about Japanese literature and made some inaccurate statements that would have gone unnoticed by most. But Hannah, even though she was just an assistant sitting in the back row, stood up and respectfully corrected him in impeccable English. Hiroshi smiled at the memory. There was a moment of absolute shock. An unknown young woman challenging an established authority was unthinkable in the Japanese academic hierarchy of the time. But she was right, and the American, instead of being offended, was impressed. At the end of the conference, he offered her an opportunity to study in the United States. Did she accept? Asked Carla, completely absorbed in the story. No, Hiroshi shook his head. She had responsibilities to her family, just like you. But that moment changed her life in other ways. The recognition of her knowledge opened doors that had previously been closed. She eventually became one of Japan's leading experts in comparative literature. He took another sip of tea. What I'm trying to say, Carla-san, is that sometimes all a talented person needs is a single moment when someone in a position to help recognizes their value and reaches out. For Han, it was that American scholar. For you, he left the sentence hanging. I understand, Carla murmured, feeling something untie inside her. You're paying forward the kindness that was shown to her. Exactly, Hiroshi. And if you want a more selfish reason, I have a keen interest in strengthening cultural ties between Japan and Brazil. People like you, who truly understand both cultures, are invaluable to that goal. Carla felt as if a final invisible barrier had fallen between them. It wasn't just about a scholarship or an act of charity. It was about mutual recognition, about honoring the past while building bridges to the future. I accept, she finally said, extending her hand across the table, and I promise to honor this opportunity with all my effort. Hiroshi smiled, shaking her hand firmly. I am extremely happy with your decision. At that moment, Carla's cell phone vibrated with a call. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed instantly. I'm sorry, it's the hospital where my mother is being treated, she explained quickly, standing up. I need to take this. As she walked away to talk on the phone, Hiroshi watched her with silent admiration. There was something special about this young woman, a resilience, a dignity that reminded him of Hana, but with a unique quality all her own. He was genuinely eager to see what she would become with the right tools at her disposal. When Carla returned, her face was pale. Did something happen? He asked worriedly. My mother fell at home, she replied, quickly grabbing her purse. Nothing serious, but I need to go to the hospital. I'm sorry to interrupt our date like this. Don't worry, family always comes first, he said, standing up. Also, can I help in any way? I have a car with a driver waiting outside. Carla hesitated for a moment, torn between pride and practical necessity. Finally, she felt it. If it's not too much trouble, I'd appreciate the ride. The hospital is on the other side of town, and public transportation would take too long. No trouble at all, Hiroshi assured her, leaving enough money to generously cover the bill. Let's go. As they left the cafe together, hurried but united by a new understanding, neither of them noticed the two figures sitting at a distant table, watching them with malicious interest. It was Deborah and Marcos, their former colleagues from the events company, talking quietly while taking discreet photos with a cell phone. I told you there was something strange between them, whispered Deborah, sending the images to a WhatsApp group. Carla, the little saint, got herself a Japanese sugar dad. Marcos smiled with disdain. This is going to be interesting. Very interesting. The months that followed were ones of intense transformation for Carla. After Mrs. Helena's recovery, who fortunately had only suffered minor abrasions in the fall, everything happened with surprising speed. Readmission to university, preparation of documents for a Japanese visa, intensive classes to update her knowledge, and above all, adapting to the idea that her interrupted dream was back to reality. Hiroshi returned to Japan 2 weeks after their second meeting, but he kept in regular contact through emails and occasional video calls, sending study materials, relevant articles, and sometimes little tidbits about Kyoto, which always made her smile. Their relationship was strictly professional, but there was an underlying camaraderie that Carla deeply valued. On a particularly sunny August morning, while organizing books on the small bookshelf in her room, Carla was surprised by the ring of her cell phone. It was Marina, a former college classmate with whom she had lost touch. Carla, is that you? Wow, it's been so long. The voice on the other end sounded strangely tense despite the friendly words. Marina, what a surprise, replied Carla, genuinely happy to hear from her old friend. How are you? How did you find my number? There was a noticeable hesitation. I'm fine, thank you. I got your contact information from the college registrar when I heard you were coming back next semester. Another pause. Actually, I'm calling because, well, there's something I think you should know. The conspiratorial tone immediately set off alarm bells in Carla. What happened? You know the blog Bastidores da Elite, right? The one that publishes gossip about Sao Paulo's high society? No, I've never heard of it, replied Carla, sitting on the edge of the bed, an unpleasant feeling forming in her stomach. Well, it's very popular among university people. The thing is, they published something about you today and about a Japanese businessman. Carla felt her blood run cold. What? What do you mean? I'll send you the link, Marina said quickly. Look, I don't know what really happened, but I thought you should know before you go back to class. Everyone is talking about it. After hanging up, Carla opened the link Marina sent her via text message. The article had a sensationalist title, From Serving to Being Served, How a Waitress Won Over a Japanese Billionaire. Below were photos of her and Hiroshi at the Botanical Cafe, clearly taken without their knowledge, accompanied by a text full of malicious insinuations about how she had secured her place in the sun through a strategic relationship. The article also mentioned the scholarship, completely distorting the nature of the opportunity, and ended with a particularly venomous comment. Sources close to the talented young woman claim that she was fired from her previous job for inappropriate behavior with customers during a luxury event. It seems that the strategy worked in the long run. With trembling hands, Carla scrolled down to the comments. Dozens of them, most of them cruel, questioning her integrity, her actual abilities, and her intentions. She recognized names of former university colleagues among the commenters, some pretending to defend her, while in fact fueling more speculation. Hot tears streamed down her face when the phone rang again. It was an unknown number. Hello? She answered with a trembling voice. Carla Oliveira, a female voice, formal and cold. This is Luia Mendez from the university's International Scholarship Program Coordination. We need you to come to our office tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss your situation in the Nakamura program. There have been issues raised that we need to clarify. The world seemed to collapse around her. All the progress of the last few months, all the carefully rebuilt hope, now threatened by lies and malicious insinuations. How would she explain this to Hiroshi? What would happen to the scholarship? With her newly regained future, her cell phone vibrated again with a notification. It was an email from the Nakamura Foundation with the subject line urgent situation in Brazil. Carla's heart raced. They already knew. At that moment, Mrs. Helena entered the room leaning on her cane, her face marked by concern. Honey, what happened? You're as white as a sheet. Carla looked at her mother, feeling once again like that humiliated girl at the wedding party. Only this time the humiliation was public, amplified by the potentially destructive internet. For a terrible moment, she wanted to give up, to retreat to the safety of her old invisible life. But then she remembered the story Hiroshi had told her about Han, about how she had had the courage to stand up and speak the truth even when all social conventions told her to remain silent. She also remembered her father's words, courage is not the absence of fear, but acting in spite of it. With hands still trembling, but with renewed determination, Carla wiped away her tears and opened the email from the Nakamura Foundation. Whatever the content, she would face it with the dignity they were trying to steal from her. The International Scholarship Coordination meeting room was an intimidating environment, with its walls covered with framed certificates and photos of smiling students in various countries. Carla sat upright in the upholstered chair, wearing the only formal blazer she owned, a navy blue, slightly tight-fitting piece she had bought on sale for job interviews. In front of her, 3 people watched her with varying expressions. Luia Mendez, the coordinator who had summoned her, a middle-aged man who introduced himself as Dr. Ricardo Almeida, director of the Department of International Relations, and a younger woman whom Carla recognized with surprise. Professor Yumiko Tanaka, your former Japanese language advisor, Senrita Oliveira, Luia began in a cold voice. We are here to discuss the circumstances of your readmission to the program, and in particular, the nature of your relationship with Mr. Nakamura, the financier of your scholarship. Carla felt her face flush, but she kept her gaze steady. With all due respect, there is no relationship. Mr. Nakamura is the director of the foundation that offers the scholarship. Our interaction is strictly professional. Dr. Almeida cleared his throat, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses. I understand, but some troubling information has come to our attention. He slid a printout of the blog article across the table. This raises questions about the selection criteria and possible inappropriate favoritism. It's all a lie, Carla replied, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. I met Mr. Nakamura under common circumstances. Yes, but I was selected for my academic qualifications. I have the best grades in Japanese in my class, as Professor Tanaka can confirm. And the issue is not your language skills, Luia interrupted, but the integrity of the process. This university has a reputation to uphold. We cannot have our international programs associated with scandals. Scandals! Carla felt indignation rising within her based on a gossip blog. Is that what the university considers a reliable source now? A tense silence fell over the room. Professor Tanaka, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Her voice was soft but firm. If I may, I would like to make a comment. She looked directly at Carla. I have known this student for years. Her talent is unquestionable, as is her character. If the Nakamura Foundation selected her, I am sure it was based on legitimate criteria. I appreciate your opinion, Professor, said Dr. Almeida. But the fact is that we have received calls from other students' parents and even contacts from the press. The situation is causing institutional discomfort. Carla took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to form. What exactly are they asking? That I give up the scholarship? That I give up the opportunity I've worked for years just because mean people are spreading lies? Before anyone could respond, the classroom door opened and an unexpected figure entered. A middle-aged Japanese man, who was not Hiroshi but carried the same aura of calm authority, wore an impeccable suit and carried a leather briefcase under his arm. "I apologize for the interruption," he said in fluent Portuguese. "To everyone's surprise, I am Takeshi Watanabe, legal representative of the Nakamura Foundation in Brazil. I was informed about this meeting and believe that my presence is relevant to clarify any misunderstanding." Dr. Almeida stood up, clearly disconcerted. "Senratin, we weren't expecting you. This is an internal university meeting with a student who is an official scholarship recipient of our foundation," Takeshi replied calmly, "whose selection process is being questioned, as I understand it. This concerns us directly." Luia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Well, since you're here, perhaps you can clarify the selection criteria for Miss Oliveira." Takeshi nodded and placed his briefcase on the table, removing some documents. "With pleasure. Miss Oliveira was selected through our program for exceptional talent in adverse circumstances. Her academic record prior to the interruption of her studies is exemplary, with grades that place her among the top 3% of Japanese language students in Brazil." He distributed copies of a document to everyone at the table. "This is the official report of the selection process conducted by an independent committee of 5 academics, 3 Japanese, and 2 Brazilian. As you can see, Ms. Oliveira passed all the regulatory stages, including a written test, interview, and language proficiency assessment." Carla looked at the documents in astonishment. She knew nothing about any of these assessments. As if reading her thoughts, Takes explained. "The tests were conducted remotely based on her previous academic record and an in-person evaluation conducted by Ms. Nakamura, who was a member of the selection committee and was in Brazil at the time. This is standard procedure for candidates in special situations." "Special situations?" Dr. Almeida questioned. "Candidates who demonstrate exceptional talent but have faced circumstances that interrupted their academic trajectory," Takeshi clarified. "The story of Ms. Oliveira dropping out of college to care for her sick mother is exactly the type of case our program seeks to support." He took another document out of the folder. "As for the allegations of inappropriate relationships, the Nakamura Foundation takes its reputation and ethical integrity extremely seriously. Therefore, I would like to make it clear that we are prepared to take legal action against any media outlet or individual who makes defamatory insinuations without evidence." A heavy silence fell over the room. Luia and Dr. Almeida exchanged worried glances while Professor Tanaka tried to hide a small smile. "Our intention was never to question the integrity of the foundation," Dr. Almeida finally said, clearly backing down. "We are simply fulfilling our duty to verify any situation that may affect our academic programs." "Understandable," replied Takeshi with a slight nod. "And precisely to ensure the total transparency of the process, the Nakamura Foundation would like to propose a solution that benefits all parties involved." He glanced briefly at Carla, Sesanquilizador, before continuing. "We are willing to expand our program at the university by offering 2 more scholarships to Brazilian students. The selection will be carried out in conjunction with the Department of International Relations, ensuring complete transparency and alignment with institutional criteria." Dr. Almeida's expression changed instantly. "That would be extremely beneficial for our institution." "I believe so," agreed Takeshi. "As for Miss Oliveira, we suggest that her scholarship be maintained as planned. After all, any decision to the contrary could be interpreted as validation of the unfounded accusations, which is certainly not in the interest of either the university or the foundation." The meeting ended shortly thereafter, with cordial handshakes and promises of future cooperation. As they left the room, Takeshi discreetly gestured for Carla to accompany him to the university courtyard. "Mr. Nakamura asked me to deliver this personally," he said when they were far from prying ears, handing her a sealed envelope. "And to make sure you know that you have the full support of the foundation." With her hands still trembling from the tension of the meeting, Carla opened the envelope. Inside was a letter handwritten in elegant Japanese in a small box wrapped in traditional washi paper. Carla's son, the letter began. I have received news of what is happening in Brazil, and I deeply regret that you are facing these difficulties because of us. Please know that your integrity has never been questioned by us. The path to realizing our dreams is rarely linear or easy. Han used to say that the moments of greatest adversity are also those that reveal our true inner strength. I am sending you this small gift as a reminder, just like the cherry blossom. The deepest beauty often blooms after the most severe storms. Stay strong on your path. We will be waiting for you in Kyoto. With admiration and respect. Hiroshi Amura. Inside the small box, Carla found a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a cherry blossom, similar to the one Hiroshi always wore, but with a feminine and elegant design. Holding the brooch up to the sunlight, Carla felt a strange mixture of emotions, gratitude, determination, and a deep sense that no matter what happened from then on, she would not face it alone. Autumn in Sao Paulo arrived with its cold mornings and sunny afternoons, bringing with it new challenges and discoveries for Carla. Back at university, she faced curious glances and whispers in the corridors, residual effects of the scandal, which, although gradually losing strength, still left its mark on her daily life. She opted for a simple strategy, absolute dedication to her studies, demonstrating through her results that she had earned her place there on her own merit. In the first few weeks, she remained reserved, speaking only when necessary and focusing entirely on her classes and assignments. Gradually, some classmates began to approach her, first because they needed help with complex translations, then out of genuine interest in getting to know her. At home, she had transformed a corner of the living room into a mini Japan, as Donna Helena joked. Japanese books, maps of Kyoto, study schedules, and postcards of tourist attractions formed a colorful mural that served both as inspiration and a constant reminder of what was to come. The cherry blossom brooch Hiroshi had given her had become her personal talisman, always pinned to the lapel of her blouses as a silent symbol of resistance. On a particularly busy afternoon in the college library, while organizing notes for a presentation on contemporary Japanese literature, Carla was surprised by the approach of a classmate she hadn't seen since returning to university. "May I sit down?" asked Renata Campos, one of the most popular students in the International Relations program, pointing to the empty chair next to Carla. "Of course," Carla replied with a polite, albeit cautious, smile. Renata had been one of the people who had liked mean comments about her on social media. "I have a problem," Renata admitted, sitting down and taking some books out of her backpack. "I have a Japanese placement test tomorrow, and I'm completely lost with these advanced kanji." "Marina said you could help." Carla hesitated for a moment. It could be a trap, a way to get close to her just to get some information or create new gossip. On the other hand, refusing to help was not in her nature. "I can try," she finally replied. "What specific part are you having trouble with?" Over the next hour, as she explained the nuances of the complex ideograms, Carla noticed a gradual change in Renata's attitude. Her initial condescension turned into genuine respect, especially when Carla demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond the basic course content. "Wow, you really understand this stuff," Renata commented, looking at her with new eyes. "Everyone is talking about you winning that scholarship because, well, you know, but it's obvious you've mastered the subject." Carla felt her face flush, but she kept her composure. "Thank you, I've worked hard to get where I am." Renata looked down, a flash of shame crossing her face. "Look, about those comments on the blog, I participated in that conversation and I shouldn't have. It was unfair to judge without knowing the whole story." The sincerity of the apology surprised Carla. Before she could respond, Renata continued, "Actually, a lot of people are rethinking what happened. After the foundation announced the additional scholarships and it became clear that you went through a legitimate selection process, well, things started to look different." "I didn't need external validation," Carla replied softly, "but I admit it helps to make everything easier." As they packed up their things to leave, Renata paused. "There's a get-together on Friday at Marina's house. Nothing formal, just a gathering to celebrate the end of the semester." "You should come," Carla hesitated. "I don't know if that would be a good idea." "Please consider it," Renata insisted. It would be a chance to start over. And honestly, everyone is curious to know what Japan is like, since you're practically our resident expert now. After Renata left, Carla remained seated for a few minutes, absorbing what had just happened. It was a small step, but a significant one. Perhaps there was room to rebuild not only her academic life, but also some kind of social life at the university. That night, after putting Mrs. Helena to bed, Carla opened her laptop for her monthly video call with Hiroshi. These conversations had become an important part of her preparation for the journey she was about to embark on, covering everything from practical questions about life in Kyoto to deeper discussions about cultural differences and academic expectations. "Good evening, Carla-san," Hiroshi greeted her in Japanese when her image appeared on the screen. He was in his office in Tokyo, with the night view of the city forming an impressive backdrop through the panoramic window behind him. "How was your day?" "Interesting, actually," she replied, also in Japanese, recounting her meeting with Renata and the invitation to the get-together. Hiroshi listened attentively, occasionally sensing her mood. "And will you go?" he asked when she finished. "I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to keep my distance, avoid new problems." "Understandable," he commented. "But allow me to share something I've learned from my own experiences as a foreigner in a hostile environment. Sometimes the isolation we adopt to protect ourselves ends up becoming our greatest prison." Carla reflected on his words. "Are you afraid I'll isolate myself in Japan too?" A slight smile touched Hiroshi's lips. "I am confident that you will find your place, as you did here, despite the difficulties, but the journey will be richer if you start building bridges now instead of walls." The conversation continued for almost an hour, covering more practical topics, necessary documents, travel schedule, details about accommodation in Kyoto. As they were about to say goodbye, Hiroshi paused, as if carefully considering his next words. "Carla-san, there's just something I'd like to share with you. I didn't mention it before because I wanted to be sure, but now it's confirmed. I'll be in Sao Paulo next month for the opening of a Japanese cultural exhibition. I thought maybe I could accompany you on your first visit to the consulate to take care of the final visa documents." Carla's heart raced unexpectedly. "That would be very helpful. Thank you." She tried to keep her voice casual, but a familiar warmth rose up her neck. After hanging up, she remained seated for a long time, absorbing the news that she would see Hiroshi again soon. Her body's involuntary reaction to the news left her intrigued and slightly uncomfortable. She had convinced herself that her gratitude and admiration for him were purely professional, but now she wondered if there was something more going on, something she would need to examine. Carefully, before she complicated the opportunity she had fought so hard for, she picked up the cherry blossom brooch from her bedside table and turned it between her fingers, watching how it caught and reflected the light from the lamp. Both the brooch and the man who had sent it, they represented a promise of transformation, of rebirth, but also a constant reminder that the most valuable things in life rarely follow the path we imagine. The VIP room at the Japanese consulate in Sao Paulo exuded a discreet elegance, with its walls decorated with black and white photographs of Tokyo and traditional paintings of Japanese landscapes. Carla nervously adjusted the collar of her white blouse as she waited, the cherry blossom brooch carefully pinned close to her heart. The month that had passed since the video call with Hiroshi had been intense and transformative, contrary to her initial expectations. She had decided to attend the get-together at Marina's house, a decision that proved to be a turning point in her university experience. The warm welcome from some classmates and the genuine curiosity of others about her scholarship and future experience in Japan had created an environment where the old gossip gradually lost its power in the face of the reality of who she really was. Now, with only 2 weeks left before her trip, the final documents were being processed, and Hiroshi, as promised, had arrived in Sao Paulo the night before for the opening of the cultural exhibition and to accompany her on this final visit to the consulate. "Sorry for the delay," said a familiar voice in Japanese, pulling her out of her thoughts. Carla stood up quickly, an involuntary smile forming on her lips. As she watched Hiroshi enter the room, he looked slightly different, his hair a little shorter, his face more relaxed than she remembered. He wore an elegant dark gray suit and, as always, the cherry blossom brooch on his lapel. "Nakamura Sunan, How nice to see you, she replied in Japanese, bowing slightly in a formal greeting. The pleasure is mine, Carla-san, he replied with a warm smile. How are you feeling a few days before the big move? Anxious, excited, scared all at the same time, she admitted with a small laugh. But ready. Before they could continue their conversation, they were interrupted by the arrival of the assistant consul, a middle-aged man with a serious expression who led them to the document processing room. The procedure was surprisingly quick and efficient. Clearly, the presence of Hiroshi, whose name seemed to open doors everywhere, sped up processes that would normally take hours. When they emerged from the consulate into the bright afternoon light of Sao Paulo, Carla was holding her passport containing the official student visa for Japan, the physical symbol that her transformation was really happening. We did it, she said, still a little incredulous, looking at the colorful sticker in her passport. I never doubted it, Hiroshi replied. He discreetly checked his watch. We still have a few hours before the exhibition opens. Would you like to have some tea? There's an important matter I'd like to discuss with you. The slightly formal tone in his voice sparked a twinge of concern in Carla. Did something happen with the grant? She asked as they walked to the car waiting for them. No, nothing like that, so. He quickly reassured her. It's about an additional project I'd like to propose. Something I think would be a perfect fit for your skills. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in an elegant Japanese tea house in the Libertad neighborhood. The place was a small sanctuary of tranquility with an interior Zen rock garden and traditional screens separating the tables to create intimate spaces for conversation. After ordering, Hiroshi took a thin folder out of his briefcase and placed it on the table. The Nakamura Foundation is expanding its educational activities in Brazil. In addition to scholarships, we are launching a series of bilingual publications on Japanese culture tailored specifically for the Brazilian audience. He opened the folder, revealing book cover designs and layout sketches. We need someone who not only masters both languages, but also understands the cultural nuances of both countries. Someone who can help translate not just words, but meanings and contexts. Carla leafed through the materials, impressed by the quality and ambition of the project. And you're offering me this job? Yes. It would be a side project to your studies in Kyoto, totally optional, of course, and with adequate compensation. He hesitated briefly. It would also represent an opportunity to work more directly with me, as I am the editorial supervisor of the series. Something in the way he said that last sentence made Carla look at him more closely. There was a certain vulnerability in his normally composed eyes, as if this proposal meant more than just a professional project. It sounds like an incredible opportunity, she replied carefully. But I confess I'm concerned about the additional workload, considering that I'll already be adapting to a new country and an intensive academic program. Hiroshi nodded, leaning back slightly, a completely valid concern. The schedule would be flexible, adapted to her possibilities. And if at any point she felt it was too much, they could reevaluate. The tea arrived, a miniature ceremony with the waitress, serving them with precise and elegant movements. When they were alone again, a comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft clinking of the cups. Is there anything else you'd like to ask? Carla finally said, gathering her courage. Does this proposal have anything to do with what happened at the wedding party? Do you feel somehow obligated to continue helping me? The question hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Hiroshi placed his cup delicately on the saucer before answering. I wouldn't deny that our first meeting was significant to me, he began, choosing his words carefully. But this proposal does not come from a sense of obligation or pity. It comes from a genuine recognition of your talent and what you can bring to this project. He paused as if deciding how much to reveal. When I lost Hana, I also lost much of the joy I found in my work. The Foundation's projects became more mechanical, fulfilling a function but lacking the heart that she always insisted was essential. In recent months working with you, even if from a distance, I have begun to rediscover that enthusiasm. Their eyes met, and Carla felt something silent pass between them. A mutual recognition of two people who had unexpectedly found a reflection of themselves in each other. I accept the project, she said finally, extending her hand across the table. It will be an honor to work with you, Hiroshi-san. When their fingers touched in a formal handshake, Carla realized she had used his first name for the first time without thinking. Even more surprising was that he didn't seem to mind. On the contrary, a soft smile lit up his normally reserved face. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly, with lively discussions about the project, ideas for the first publication, and plans for Carla's adaptation to Kyoto. When they left the tea house to head to the cultural exhibition, they both seemed lighter, as if an invisible barrier had been removed. What neither of them noticed was the discreet figure sitting at a distant table, partially hidden by a screen, who had observed the entire encounter with calculated interest. When they left, the person got up, leaving a generous note on the table, and discreetly followed him to the car. In the bag he carried was a professional camera with a powerful zoom lens and a press badge from a gossip magazine. The art gallery at the Japanese Cultural Center was filled with elegant people circulating among the exhibits, champagne glasses in hand, commenting on the works with studied expressions of admiration. The opening of the exhibition, Bridges Between Worlds. Brazil and Japan in Dialogue had attracted not only the Japanese-Brazilian community, but also business leaders, diplomats, and figures from Sao Paulo high society. Carla wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, a last-minute gift from Mrs. Helena, who had insisted that her daughter needed something special for the occasion. She felt simultaneously out of place and exactly where she should be. At her side, Hiroshi discreetly guided her through the halls, introducing her to important people with barely concealed pride in his voice. This is Carla Oliveira, the brilliant translator who will be working with us on the bilingual publications project, he said repeatedly, in Japanese to the Japanese guests and in her carefully articulated Portuguese to the Brazilians. With each introduction, Carla felt a new confidence growing within her. Not the arrogance of someone who thinks they are superior, but the serenity of someone who has finally found their place in the world. The same people who might have ignored or belittled her if they had seen her serving. Canapes now listened attentively when she spoke about the nuances of translation or aspects of Japanese culture she had studied. It's impressive how you have mastered the most subtle aspects of the language, commented an elderly lady, the wife of an important Japanese-Brazilian businessman. My husband was born in Japan and still has difficulty with certain expressions that you use naturally. Thank you for the compliment, Carla replied with sincere humility. I still have a lot to learn. As they walked to the next exhibition room, Hiroshi leaned slightly closer to her ear to speak, preventing others from hearing. You're doing perfectly. Everyone is enchanted by you. I feel like Cinderella at the ball, she confessed in Japanese with a small smile. I just hope I don't turn into a pumpkin at midnight. He laughed softly, a sound Carla had rarely heard, and which, for some reason, made her heart race. Don't worry, this time the clock won't strike any final hour. The evening progressed in a whirlwind of conversation, art, and ambient music. At one point, Carla stepped away briefly to use the restroom. In the elegant hallway leading to the facilities, she found herself alone for the first time in hours. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to reflect on how much her life had changed in such a short time. Carla Oliveira, the unfamiliar female voice, made her turn around. An elegant woman, approximately 40 years old, with hair cut in a perfect bob and astute eyes behind stylish glasses, approached her with a calculated smile. Yes, Carla replied cautiously. Sandra Menezes, Sociedade magazine, is a force to be reckoned with. The woman held out a business card. I would love to talk to you about your fascinating journey from waitress to protege of one of the most influential Japanese businessmen in Brazil. Quite a story, don't you think? Carla felt the blood freeze in her veins. I have nothing to say, she replied automatically, trying to walk past the woman. Don't be modest, insisted Sandra, subtly blocking her path. I have some interesting photos of you and Nakamura-san that are very revealing of the type of relationship you have. I don't know what you're talking about, replied Carla, struggling to maintain her composure. If you'll excuse me, think carefully, said the journalist, lowering her voice to an almost conspiratorial tone. We can tell this story in two ways, either as an inspiring journey of overcoming adversity and merit, or as, well, something less flattering. The choice is yours. Before Carla could respond, a third voice spoke up, firm, clear, and unexpectedly familiar. The choice, in fact, is up to the courts, Menezes. Carla turned to find Takeshi Watanabe, the legal representative of the Nakamura Foundation, who had appeared at the university meeting, approaching with determined steps. As the Nakamura Foundation's lawyer, I must inform you that any defamatory publication will result in immediate legal action, he continued, with frightening calm. I believe your media outlet is already familiar with our zero-tolerance policies on harassment and defamation. Is it not? Sandra paled visibly. I was just doing my job, seeking the truth. The truth, Takeshi interrupted, is that Ms. Oliveira is an academic scholarship recipient of exceptional merit, selected by an independent committee. Any insinuation to the contrary would not only lack factual basis, but would constitute criminal defamation. He took a step forward, his voice lowering to an almost confidential tone. And I must remind you that the Brazilian law for the protection of honor and image is quite strict, especially when there is evidence of continued persecution. The journalist took a step back, her face a mixture of irritation and apprehension. I understand your point. Good evening. When Sandra walked away, Carla exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, Mr. Watanabe. How did you know? Security is part of my job, he replied simply. Mr. Nakamura asked me to ensure that this event took place without any unpleasant incidents. Considering your recent history with the sensationalist media, I thought it prudent to keep a watchful eye. As they returned to the main hall, Kia felt a complex mix of emotions. Gratitude for the protection, but also a lingering discomfort at still needing it. How long would her life be defined by these episodes, by suspicions and insinuations? They found Hiroshi talking to the Japanese consul. Seeing Carla's troubled expression, he immediately apologized to his interlocutor and came to meet her. Did something happen? He asked in Japanese, concern evident on his face. Takeshi briefly explained the situation in a low voice. Hiroshi's expression hardened momentarily before softening as he looked at Carla. I'm sorry you still have to deal with them, he said. Perhaps it was a mistake to bring you to such a public event. No, Carla replied firmly, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. I'm not going to hide or be ashamed of something I didn't do. I haven't given cause for these insinuations before, and I won't now. A meaningful silence hung between them for a few seconds. In fact, she continued, feeling a wave of determination rise within her, I think it's time to face this head-on. Hiroshi watched her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. What do you have in mind? An interview? Replied Carla. Not with tabloids or gossip blogs, but with a reputable outlet. To tell the true story about the scholarship, about the selection process, about the foundation, not as a defense, but as an affirmation. Takeshi and Hiroshi exchanged glances. It would be unusual, Takeshi commented thoughtfully. The foundation usually keeps a low profile about its scholarship recipients. But it's not unprecedented, added Hiroshi, a slight smile forming on his lips. In fact, it could serve as an excellent launch for the bilingual publications program. Carla felt something change inside her at that moment, a subtle but profound transformation, as if she were finally taking control of her own narrative. No longer the humiliated waitress, no longer the victim of gossip, but a confident professional about to embark on an international journey. There is something else we need to discuss, Hiroshi said after a moment of reflection. Something I have been considering proposing, but wasn't sure if it was the right time. His serious tone sent a shiver of apprehension down Carla's spine. What could it be? I would like to invite you to join the executive committee of the Brazil-Japan Scholarship Program, he said, taking her completely by surprise. As a former scholarship recipient and someone who has experienced firsthand the unique challenges we face here, your perspective would be invaluable in helping us improve the process. Carla was momentarily speechless. The impact of the proposal reverberating in her mind was not only a recognition of her value, but an invitation to help shape the future of a program that could transform lives like hers. That would mean, she began excitedly, it would mean a formal position at the foundation, Hiroshi completed, compatible with your studies, of course, but also clearly establishing your role as part of the team, not just as a beneficiary. What he didn't say, but both understood, was that such a position would also put a definitive end to insinuations about the nature of their relationship. It would be a public declaration of professional trust, transcending any personal speculation. As Carla absorbed this new proposal, the sounds of the party around her seemed to diminish, as if the world were momentarily on pause, awaiting her decision. In her mind, images from her recent past flashed by. The invisible waitress at the wedding party, the dedicated student who had abandoned her dreams out of necessity, the young woman humiliated by a gesture of human connection. And now here she was, about to accept not just an opportunity to study, not just a professional project, but a chance to really make a difference in the lives of others who, like her, just needed an open door to demonstrate their true potential. I accept, her voice finally said, firm and clear. It would be an honor to be part of this committee and help build bridges for other students. Hiroshi's smile lit up with a rare intensity, and for a brief moment, Carla glimpsed the man behind the professional facade, someone who, like her, had faced losses and challenges, but had found a way to turn pain into purpose. Then it's decided, he said, extending his hand formally. Welcome to the Nakamura Foundation team, Oliveira-san. As their hands touched, the event's official photographer captured the moment, an image that weeks later would be published in a respected cultural newspaper, along with Carla's interview about her new role at the foundation and her journey. Takeshi gave a discreet smile of approval before stepping away to deal with other matters, leaving Carla and Hiroshi alone for a moment amid the buzz of the exhibition. You know, Hiroshi said after a brief silence, there's something I've been thinking about since that night at the wedding party. His gaze was distant, as if reliving the memory, when everyone was looking but no one was really seeing. What would that be? Asked Carla, feeling a strange tension in the air. How a single moment of kindness can completely change the course of a life. His eyes met hers with a quiet intensity, as if they had lived 2 lifetimes. Before Carla could answer, they were interrupted by the exhibition curator, calling Iraq to give the official opening speech. With a small, apologetic wave, he walked away toward the makeshift stage. Alone for a moment, Carla touched the cherry blossom brooch on her blouse, feeling each delicate silver petal under her fingers. She had begun this journey as an invisible waitress, serving the privileged, who was now about to cross the ocean. Not just as a student, but as part of something bigger than herself, a living bridge between cultures. On stage, Hiroshi began his speech by talking about the invisible connections that unite people and nations, about how true understanding transcends languages and borders. As she listened, Carla felt a growing certainty in her chest. Regardless of what the future held, this was her true calling, not just translating words, but building understanding. What had begun as a chance encounter at a party where no one was there had turned into the defining moment of her life. Not because of a romantic fairy tale, as the malicious gossip insinuated, but because of a much deeper mutual recognition, the recognition of human value beyond all social barriers. And as the applause for Hiroshi's speech echoed through the hall, Carla knew with a crystal clarity that we rarely experience in life that she had found her place in the world, not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as the protagonist of her own journey. Guarulhos International Airport pulsed with the frenetic energy typical of Monday mornings. Announcements in multiple languages echoed through the loudspeakers. Luggage carts crisscrossed the lobby in all directions, and travelers of various nationalities converged on their respective destinations like rivers flowing to the sea. Carla stood silently in front of the departure board, watching the green light flash next to her flight to Tokyo. At her side, Donna Helena held her arm tightly, as if trying to absorb every final second of her daughter's presence before their separation. "Promise you'll eat right?" she asked for the 3rd time. Her face was a mixture of pride and maternal concern. "They say that in Japan people eat very small portions." Carla smiled, squeezing her mother's hand affectionately. "I promise. And will you promise to take your medicine on time and not stay up late watching soap operas?" "I'll try," replied Donna Helena with a dramatic sigh. "But without you to keep an eye on me, I can't guarantee anything." The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of preparations, goodbyes, and conflicting emotions. The interview Carla had given to a respected cultural newspaper, speaking openly about her career and her new role at the Nakamura Foundation, had had a surprisingly positive impact. What had once been malicious gossip had gradually turned into expressions of admiration, especially among her colleagues at the university, many of whom had attended a small farewell party organized by Marina and Renata. But the most significant moment had been her final conversation with Hiroshi 2 days earlier, in a video call where they discussed the last details of her arrival in Kyoto. "I'll be in Tokyo for a conference when you arrive," he explained. "But Tenace and my assistant will meet you at the airport and accompany you on the train trip to Kyoto. Your apartment will be ready and we'll give you a few days to settle in before we officially start work. Thank you for everything." She replied, feeling that words were inadequate to express the depth of her gratitude for believing in her when she herself did not believe. Hiroshi had smiled in that reserved way she now knew so well. "I did nothing but recognize what was already there. Carla-san, the rest was all you." Now standing at the airport, ticket in hand, and the future unfolding before her like an unknown path, but one full of promise. Carla reflected on how it had all begun with a simple act of kindness on a night that seemed to belong to another life. "Last call for flight, JL8357 to Tokyo. Passengers, please proceed immediately to the boarding gate," announced the metallic voice on the sound system, bringing Carla back to the present. "It's time," said Mrs. Helena, her voice faltering slightly. "My daughter, going to conquer Japan." They hugged each other tightly. Words became unnecessary between mother and daughter, who had weathered so many storms together. When they finally parted, both had tears in their eyes, but also determined smiles. "This isn't goodbye," Carla reminded her. "I'll be back to visit in 6 months, and we'll video chat every Sunday." I know," Donna Helena wiped away a tear. "Now go, before I start crying for real and you miss that plane." With one last hug and a kiss on her mother's forehead, Carla picked up her carry-on bag and walked toward the international departure area. At passport control, the officer examined her Japanese visa with interest. "Student?" he asked, stamping the document. "Yes," she replied, "and translator." "Good luck," he wished her unexpectedly in basic Japanese. "Thank you," Carla replied in the same language, feeling as if the universe was sending her a small sign of approval as she boarded the plane and settled into her economy class seat. Hiroshi had offered her an upgrade to business class, but she had politely declined, preferring that the money be directed to other scholarships. Carla took out the small notebook that had accompanied her since her college days. On the first page, the phrase she had written years ago still shone, now with new meaning. "Words build bridges between worlds." Below it, she added a new line. "Sometimes a single gesture builds bridges between souls." Closing the notebook, she turned her gaze to the window, watching Sao Paulo gradually shrink as the plane gained altitude. She thought of everyone she had left behind. Her mother, now cared for by a nurse hired with her scholarship stipend, her new friends at university, even her former colleagues at the events company, who had unwittingly played a role in her journey. And she also thought about what lay ahead. The intensive study program in Kyoto, the bilingual publications project, her role on the scholarship committee, and yes, the prospect of working more closely with Hiroshi, exploring that strange connection they had formed, whatever it was. Leaning back in her seat as the plane stabilized above the clouds, Carla reflected on how life often surprises us, not with what we seek, but with what we need. 3 years ago, when she had dropped out of university to care for her mother, she had believed that her dreams were over. Now she understood that they had only been redirected, guiding her down an unexpected path that, despite all the difficulties, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. 6 months later, a discreet photo appeared in the Nakamura Foundation's internal newsletter. It showed a diverse group of young translators in training gathered in a traditional cherry blossom garden in Kyoto. In the center of the group, Carla smiled serenely, the cherry blossom brooch shining discreetly on her lapel. It was not just a symbol of her connection to Hiroshi, but a mark of her own renewed identity. In Sao Paulo, subtle changes began to take place at the events company where it all began. New protocols of respect and inclusion were implemented with zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior against foreign employees or guests. No one directly mentioned the incident with the waitress and the Japanese businessman, but everyone knew that something had fundamentally changed in the company's culture. In her new apartment in Kyoto, on the rare free nights between intensive classes and translation sessions, Carla would occasionally open the window to watch the cherry trees in the nearby park. Sometimes Hiroshia would join her in these silent contemplations during his visits to the city. They would sit side by side, drinking tea and talking about literature, culture, or simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. Two lonely souls who had somehow found in each other an echo of their own souls. What existed between them? Friendship, mutual respect, or perhaps the potential for something deeper continued to evolve naturally without haste or expectations. Both had learned through painful experiences that the most meaningful relationships are those that respect each person's time and individuality. On a particularly meaningful afternoon, as they walked under a shower of cherry blossom petals, Hiroshi shared an ancient Japanese wisdom. Insug is the art of repairing broken ceramics with gold, transforming the fractures into part of the object's beauty. Perhaps it is the same with people. Our fractures and repairs do not diminish us, but make us more valuable, more unique. Carla reflected on these words as she watched the petals fall like pink snow around her. She thought about all the fractures in her own life, the interrupted dreams, the humiliations she had faced, the daily struggles, and how each of them had somehow contributed to shaping her into the person she was now. Her journey was far from over. There was still much to learn, many challenges to face, many bridges to build. But one thing was clear. She would never again allow anyone to define her worth or dictate the limits of her dreams. She was Carla Oliveira. Not just the waitress, not just the student, not just the protege of a powerful benefactor, but a complete woman on her own journey, building her path with every word translated, every cultural barrier broken down, every hand extended to help others like her. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of her entire experience, that sometimes in the most unlikely moments and in the places where we least expect it, we find not only new opportunities, but also parts of ourselves that we didn't even know we were looking for. As she would later write in the preface to the first book in the Nakamura Foundation's bilingual series, she was a woman who danced with dignity in a place where no one danced with me. And that changed everything. Not because a fairy tale came true, but because a single moment of courage opened the door to all the possibilities that had always been dormant within me. And that, in the end, was what really mattered. Not external judgments, not social conventions, not the expectations of others, but the courage to remain true to one's own essence, to reach out when everyone else retreats, to speak when silence would be easier, and to dance even when no one else is willing to join you.